The report that changed everything. Admiral Thraxus slouched in his command chair aboard the Draid Empire's flagship Inevitable Dominance, his scaled fingers drumming against the armrest made from the crystallized bones of a conquered species. The morning had started normally enough, crushing a minor rebellion, accepting the surrender of 2 planetary systems, and reviewing the latest military expenditure reports. But now, staring at the holographic display before him, he wondered if perhaps he'd finally succumb to scale rot. "Play it again," he commanded, all 4 of his crimson eyes narrowing as the human entertainment feed flickered to life. The footage showed a human female, barely into adulthood, willingly jumping from what appeared to be the edge of their planet's atmosphere. She was wearing nothing but a thin suit and what the intelligence reports called a wingsuit. "Calculating survival probability," chirped the ship's AI. "Don't bother," Thraxus growled. "This is the 7th recording we've analyzed. Somehow, they survive. Every single time." His tail twitched in irritation, sending a junior officer scurrying for cover. The Draid Empire had ruled the known galaxy for 15 millennia, their reputation built on being the ultimate survivors. They'd evolved on Dror, a planet with triple Earth's gravity, an atmosphere of corrosive gases, and wildlife that made most species' nightmare creatures look like therapy pets. Their bodies were masterpieces of evolution, redundant organs, acid-resistant scales, bones that could withstand crushing depths, and reflexes that made light speed look sluggish. And yet... "Computer, show me the Hot Ones episode again." The hologram shifted to display humans willingly consuming capsaicin-based substances for entertainment. Thraxus had personally seen these sauces dissolve starship hull plating. "Supreme Commander." A breathless junior intelligence officer burst onto the bridge, their scales shifting through various shades of panic. "We've intercepted more transmissions. The humans, they're having something called a Tide Pod Challenge." Thraxus's secondary heart actually stopped for a moment. "Explain." They're eating cleaning products, sir. For something called Internet points." The bridge fell silent. Even the usual hum of the antimatter drive seemed muted, as if the ship itself was trying to process this information. "Contact the High Council," Thraxus finally ordered, his voice carrying the weight of someone who knew the galaxy was about to change forever. "And get me everything we have on human social media." The next few days were a blur of increasingly bizarre intelligence reports. Humans, it seemed, had taken one look at their death world of a planet and decided that merely surviving wasn't entertaining enough. They needed to turn everything into a sport, a challenge, or worst of all, a viral video trend. The Draid High Council convened an emergency session, their first in 3 centuries. The chamber, carved from the core of a dead star, hummed with nervous energy as report after report was presented. "They have something called parkour," one intelligence officer explained, their scales pale with disbelief. "They treat their planet's gravity as an optional suggestion. Their young deliberately consume neurotoxins for recreation," another added. "They call it getting wasted. They keep apex predators as pets," a third chimed in. "And speak to them in high-pitched voices about who's a good boy." Thraxus watched as the council members' colors shifted through various shades of disbelief and existential crisis. The Draids had based their entire civilization, their very identity, on being the toughest species in existence. Their diplomatic strategy consisted mainly of showing up and letting other species draw their own conclusions about challenging an empire of 8-foot-tall armored lizards who could breathe acid. But humans treated death-defying acts as hobby activities. "There's more," Thraxus announced, stepping forward. "We've discovered their entertainment industry. They simulate near-death experiences and record them. They call them action movies. Their young are exposed to these from an early age, along with something called cartoon physics." The council chamber erupted in hisses of disbelief. "We have 3 options," Thraxus continued. "First, we could try to conquer them. He paused, letting his next words sink in. But our psychological warfare tactics might be interpreted as entertainment suggestions. Several council members shuddered, remembering the Tide Pod incident. Second, we could ignore them and maintain our current borders. Another pause. But their extreme sports enthusiasts are already pushing into our territory, looking for sick new spots to shred. And the third option? High Counselor Vermax asked, dreading the answer. We adapt, Thraxis said simply. We learn to understand them. Perhaps even, collaborate. The chamber fell silent again, broken only by the sound of someone's ceremonial armor creaking as they shifted uncomfortably. They've already expressed interest in establishing diplomatic relations, Thraxis continued. They want to invite us to something called an X Games. What does the X stand for? Someone asked. Extreme, Thraxis answered. Always extreme. The council chambers filled with the sound of multiple secondary hearts skipping beats simultaneously. As Thraxis left the council chamber hours later, he received yet another urgent report. Humans had discovered their security barrier technology. Instead of being intimidated by it, they were using it for something called bounce houses at children's parties. He needed a drink. Unfortunately, the humans had already raided the palace's storage of ceremonial acid wine, declaring it spicy, but not ghost pepper spicy. The galaxy would never be the same. First Contact Protocol, what protocol? Ambassador Sarah Chen had read the First Contact Protocols exactly 17 times. She'd memorized every clause, subclause, and emergency procedure. None of them, however, covered what to do when your alien counterpart faints because you offered them just a regular Earth coffee, nothing fancy. Is he okay? She asked the attending Draid medical officer, watching as they attempted to revive Ambassador Kexthor with what appeared to be electric shock strong enough to power a small city. The stimulant content, the medical officer hissed, scales shifting to a concerned purple. His tertiary liver wasn't prepared. Sarah made a mental note, maybe start with decoff next time. The diplomatic mission had started traditionally enough. The Draids had arranged a meeting on their most impressive battle station, a structure carved from a repurposed dwarf star. The human delegation had arrived in what the Draids considered a laughably small ship, only to have the aliens' mandibles drop when they realized it was actually a recreational vehicle that Ambassador Chen used for weekend getaways. You travel through void space, for fun, the station's commander had asked, all four eyes blinking in disbelief. Oh yeah, Sarah had replied cheerfully. You should see the actual cruise ships. Those things have zero-G water parks. That had been the first of many cultural misunderstandings. The Draids had prepared what they considered to be lethal challenges to test the humans' worthiness. The humans, meanwhile, had interpreted everything as increasingly exciting tourist attractions. This is amazing. Lieutenant James Rodriguez, the delegation's security officer, exclaimed while examining the station's acid-filled defensive moat. Perfect for extreme kayaking. Mind if I take a quick dip? That's molecular acid, the station's security chief pointed out. It can dissolve tungsten. Sweet. Would make for some sick GoPro footage. Anyone bring a camera? The Draids had quickly learned that their traditional intimidation tactics weren't just ineffective, they were counterproductive. Every threat display was met with enthusiasm, every deadly challenge with requests for souvenir photos. Your atmospheric processors are pumping corrosive gas, Ambassador Kexthor had mentioned, hoping to discourage the humans from exploring the lower levels. Ooh, like the sulfur springs back home. Sarah's eyes lit up. We should set up a spa. Those are great for the pores. The breaking point came during the formal dinner. The Draids had served their traditional diplomatic meal, foods that would kill any non-Draid species. The human delegation had not only survived but asked for recipes. This neutron pepper sauce is incredible, Sarah commented, casually consuming something that could theoretically power a small fusion reactor. Reminds me of my grandmother's Sichuan cooking, though she'd probably add more Szechuan peppercorns. Ambassador Kexthor, recently recovered from the coffee incident, watched in horror as the humans treated lethal substances like a potluck dinner. Perhaps, he suggested desperately, we should discuss the terms of humanity's submission to the Draid Empire. The human delegation exchanged glances before bursting into laughter. Oh honey, Sarah wiped a tear from her eye, we were thinking more along the lines of a cultural exchange program. You guys would love Earth. We've got these things called escape rooms, they're like your death mazes but with puzzles. And wait until you try bungee jumping. Bungee jumping? Yeah, you tie an elastic cord to your legs and jump off high places. Super fun. Though we might need to reinforce the cords for your species, given your mass. Kexthor's scales shifted through 7 different colors before settling on a peculiar shade of grayish. You do this, voluntarily? Well, yeah. How else would you spend a weekend? Oh. We should also introduce you to roller coasters. They're like your orbital defense systems but designed for entertainment. The Draid ambassador turned to his aide. Contact the High Council. The situation is worse than we thought. They don't just survive death worlds, they turn them into amusement parks. Meanwhile, Sarah was scrolling through her phone. Check this out, my niece's 5th birthday party at the local volcano research center. Kids these days, right? Always wanting the exciting venues. The diplomatic meeting eventually had to be adjourned when half the Draid delegation needed medical attention. Not from any human aggression, but from the sheer psychological trauma of watching Lieutenant Rodriguez demonstrate parkour using the station's impenetrable security fields as springboards. Back in her quarters, Sarah composed her first official report to Earth. First contact proceeding better than expected. The Draids are surprisingly receptive to human culture, though their medical facilities are getting quite a workout. Minor misunderstanding when they interpreted our UV tanning beds as radiation torture chambers, but we sorted that out. Lieutenant Rodriguez has already started a 0G parkour club with some of the younger Draids. Also, their ceremonial acid wine would make an excellent marinade for barbecue. P.S. Send more coffee. For some reason, they think it's a military-grade stimulant. Could be useful for future negotiations. P.P.S. Their orbital defense rings would make an incredible space roller coaster. Requesting permission to forward the idea to Disney's Interstellar division. Meanwhile, in the Draid High Council's emergency bunker, they'd insisted on meeting there after learning about human flash mobs. Ambassador Kexthor delivered his own report. Most exalted ones, we face an unprecedented situation. The humans don't just survive our deadliest environments, they get bored with them. They don't just resist our most lethal substances, they ask for extra spicy versions. And most terrifyingly, they want to collaborate. They speak of something called an interstellar cultural festival. They want to show us their extreme sports. They've already started modifying our defensive capabilities into what they call parkour paradises. In short, we're not dealing with mere Deathworlders. We're dealing with Death World enthusiasts. May the void have mercy on our scales. The council sat in stunned silence, broken only by the sound of a human voice echoing through the station's corridors. Hey, who wants to try 0G skydiving? We've got extra suits. Several council members fainted. The galaxy's most feared species had finally met their match, not in combat, but in humanity's relentless enthusiasm for turning anything deadly into a recreational activity. The age of Draid supremacy was ending. The age of hold my beer and watch this was just beginning. The Great Cultural Exchange. Dr. Vextra, head of the Draid Cultural Integration Committee, stared at the report on her desk with all 4 eyes, each one displaying a different level of disbelief. The document was titled First Quarter Results of Human-Draid Exchange Program, but it might as well have been called How Everything We Know About the Galaxy is Wrong. This can't be accurate, she muttered, her scales shifting to a shade of disbelief previously unknown to Draid chromatic science. They're teaching our warrior hatchlings something called TikTok dances. Her assistant, Kartal, nodded nervously. It gets worse, Doctor. The humans have introduced our young to something called viral challenges. Security footage from the Imperial Youth Academy played on the holoscreen. A group of young Draids, their scales still soft and iridescent, were attempting to balance on their tails while singing something called Baby Shark. The viewing chamber filled with the sound of Vexthra's secondary heart having palpitations. But these are our future warriors, she protested. They're supposed to be learning the ancient art of acid breathing and how to intimidate lesser species with their eye ridges. About that, Kartal consulted another datapad. The human exchange students have convinced them that acid breathing would make for awesome special effects on something called Instagram. They're planning to start a channel called Draid Dance Crew. The footage shifted to show a human teenager teaching a group of Draid youngsters how to do something called the Macarena. The young Draids were surprisingly coordinated, their tails adding an extra flourish to the movements. At least tell me the military exchange program is going better. Vexthra asked hopefully. Kartal's scales turned an uncomfortable shade of chartreuse. Perhaps you should see for yourself. The scene changed to the Draid Empire's most prestigious military training facility. Where once proud warriors had practiced the art of planetary subjugation, now stood something far more terrifying, an intergalactic CrossFit gym. Come on, you can do it, a human instructor cheered as a group of elite Draid warriors attempted something called burpees. Feel the burn. No pain, no gain. But we're literally fireproof, one warrior protested between gasps. How can we feel the burn? It's a metaphor, bro. Now drop and give me 20. Vexthra watched in horror as the galaxy's most feared warriors were introduced to protein shakes, leg day, and the concept of getting swole. But the cultural exchange wasn't just affecting the Draids. Reports were coming in from Earth as well, where Draid exchange students were causing their own brand of chaos. At Harvard University, a Draid professor had accidentally started a new extreme sport by demonstrating how his species traditionally crossed acid lakes. Human students immediately formed the Acid Parkour Association, and were now petitioning for it to become an Olympic event. In Texas, a Draid chef's attempt to recreate their traditional ceremonial feast had resulted in the creation of a new food challenge called the Supernova Wing Challenge. 3 restaurants had to be evacuated, and the local fire department had developed a special containment protocol for spice-related emergencies. There's more, Kartal continued, pulling up another report. The humans have introduced our species to something called energy drinks. They combine them with our ceremonial acid wine. They call it a xenomorph bomb. Is it lethal? Vexthra asked. No, but it makes you really want to redesign our orbital defense systems into something called a space half-pipe. The cultural contamination was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Draid fashion designers were incorporating human, extreme sportswear into traditional armor designs. Young Draids were adding LED strips to their scales and calling it mood lighting. Someone had even started a restaurant chain called Human Style that served traditional Draid military rations with hot sauce and ranch dressing. But perhaps the most shocking development came from the entertainment sector. A Human-Draid collaboration had produced a new reality TV show called So You Think You Can Survive? It featured contestants from both species attempting to survive increasingly ridiculous challenges. Last week's episode had them trying to escape a collapsing neutron star while solving a Rubik's Cube, Kartal reported. Rating were through the roof. The human contestant actually complained that it wasn't extreme enough. Vexthra slumped in her chair, her tail curling around its base in distress. What about our reputation? We're supposed to be the galaxy's most fearsome species. Oh, that's actually improved, Kartal brightened. The humans have been posting about us on their social media. They call us totally metal and absolute units. Apparently, that's a good thing. We're trending on something called Reddit. The committee room's doors suddenly burst open as a group of young Draids rushed in, their scales decorated with temporary tattoos. Dr. Vexthra. You have to see this. They were led by Kthos, once a promising warrior candidate, now apparently an influencer. The humans taught us how to combine our acid breathing with their parkour techniques. We call it acid trail art. Check out our TikTok views. Vexthra watched the video, showing Draids using their natural abilities to create glowing, acid-etched patterns in the air while performing impossible acrobatics. It was beautiful, terrifying, and had apparently gone viral across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. We've also started a fusion restaurant, another young Draid chimed in. We combine traditional Draid military nutrition packets with something called Flamin' Hot Cheetos. The humans can't get enough of it. We have a 3-month waiting list. As if to punctuate the cultural chaos, the station's announcement system began playing something called K-pop, a human art form that had inexplicably become popular among the Draid fleet's navigation officers. Perhaps, Vexthra said slowly, watching as a group of humans and Draids outside her window attempted to set up something called a zero-G trampoline park, we should consider this less of a cultural exchange and more of a cultural supernova. K'Artal nodded, their scales now sporting what appeared to be glitter. The human term is fusion, doctor. Like their nuclear weapons, but with dance moves. Speaking of fusion, one of the young Draids interrupted, you have to try our new drink. It's a combination of human coffee, our ceremonial acid wine, and something called Red Bull. We call it a thermonuclear frappe. Vexthra looked at the drink, which appeared to be glowing and had somehow achieved sentience. It was garnished with something called a Tide Pod. What does it do? She asked, dreading the answer. Nobody knows, the young Draid replied cheerfully. But it's got a 5-star rating on Space Yelp. As Vexthra contemplated the glowing beverage, she realized that the galaxy wasn't just changing, it was being completely reimagined by a bizarre fusion of human audacity and Draid capabilities. The resulting culture was either going to destroy the universe or make it a lot more interesting. Probably both. The drink in front of her pulsed with an otherworldly light, almost seeming to wink at her. Well, she said, reaching for the glass, as the humans say, YOLO. K'Artal's scales shifted to a concerned magenta. Actually, doctor, given our redundant organs, we technically have multiple lives dash. But Vexthra had already taken a sip, and somewhere in the distance, a new viral challenge was born. The Intergalactic Olympics incident. The Intergalactic Olympic Committee's emergency meeting was in its 7th hour, and High Commissioner Zhang was developing a migraine. On the holoscreen before her, footage played of what was supposed to be a simple exhibition match of Human-Draid hybrid sports. Instead, it looked more like carefully orchestrated chaos. Let me get this straight, she massaged her temples, addressing the Draid sports minister, Thax, whose scales were cycling through various shades of embarrassment. The humans suggested combining parkour with your traditional acid-breathing techniques. We thought it would be a reasonable compromise, Thax defended. How were we supposed to know they'd add jetpacks? The footage showed a human athlete, wearing what appeared to be modified Draid armor, performing a triple backflip through an acid waterfall while using a jetpack to propel themselves through floating obstacle courses. Their Draid competitor responded by using their natural abilities to create an impromptu light show of acid trails, turning the entire event into what one commentator called a cross between Olympic gymnastics and a death metal concert. The ratings are unprecedented, reported media director Johnson, trying to hide his enthusiasm. We're getting views from 17 different galaxies. The merchandise alone. The merchandise is part of the problem. Zhang interrupted, pulling up another report. The extreme survival gear line has already caused 3 diplomatic incidents. We can't have civilians running around in modified Draid battle armor. To be fair, Thax interjected, your species started selling something called Immortal Energy Drink, made with diluted Draid metabolic enzymes. Our younglings are using it to pull all-nighters for their TikTok streaming sessions. The committee room fell silent as they watched more footage from the opening ceremonies. What was supposed to be a dignified parade of athletes had turned into something the media was calling the greatest show in multiple dimensions. Human cheerleaders performed gravity-defying routines while Draid honor guards demonstrated their traditional battle dances, somehow incorporating something called breakdancing. The Olympic torch had been lit using a combination of human rocket fuel and Draid bioluminescence, creating a flame that could be seen from orbit and had its own Instagram account. At least the traditional sports are going well? Zhang asked hopefully. Thax's scales turned an interesting shade of puce. About that, the humans have some concerns about our definition of water sports. More footage played, showing the Draid Aquatics arena filled with what they considered standard swimming conditions, a mixture of water and various acids that would dissolve most spacecraft hulls. The human team asked if they could compete wearing their standard gear. Thax continued. We agreed, not realizing they meant experimental deep-sea diving suits modified with shield technology they reverse-engineered from our military bases. Which they then bedazzled, Johnson added, not even trying to hide his grin now. The team's TikTok dance video in those suits has gone viral across 3 dimensions. Zhang pulled up the schedule for the remaining events, each one more ridiculous than the last. Extreme mountain climbing, now with active volcanoes. Zero-G rugby, featuring quantum uncertainty fields. Synchronized swimming in plasma fields. Cross-country racing through time dilation zones. Competitive tea drinking, using Draid ceremonial acid wine. The tea drinking event wasn't even planned, Thax noted. Someone just challenged someone else, and now it's the most watched event in the quadrant. The coverage switched to live footage from the Freestyle Survival event, where competitors had to navigate through increasingly absurd obstacles while performing what the commentators were calling sick tricks. Did that human just backflip over a black hole? Zhang asked, squinting at the screen. Mini black hole, Johnson corrected. For safety reasons. Though the Draid team is protesting, saying it makes the course too easy. The situation had escalated further when the 2 species started combining their training methods. Draid warriors were now incorporating human parkour into their traditional battle techniques, while human athletes were attempting to replicate Draid biological abilities through increasingly creative use of technology. The problem isn't just the sports, Zhang sighed, pulling up another report. It's the side effects. Look at what's happening in the Olympic Village. The footage showed human and Draid athletes engaging in what they called cultural exchange activities. This apparently involved humans teaching Draids about energy drinks and social media, while Draids introduced humans to their traditional battle meditation techniques, which humans had somehow turned into a new form of extreme yoga. They've started a hybrid cooking competition, Johnson reported. They're calling it Master Chef, Survival Edition. Last night's challenge involved making a soufflé in plasma storm conditions. Did anyone succeed? Thax asked, genuinely curious. 3 teams did. The winning dish was something called neutron-seared crème brûlée with quantum foam garnish. The judges needed medical attention, but they gave it 5 stars before passing out. The meeting was interrupted by a commotion outside. A group of athletes, human and Draid alike, had decided to create a new sport on the spot. They were calling it Extreme Hide and Seek, and it involved active camouflage technology, dimensional phasing, and what appeared to be borrowed stealth ship technology. The good news, Johnson offered, is that merchandise sales are through the roof. The bad news is that we can't find half the competitors. Literally. They've either achieved quantum superposition or they're all hiding in the station's maintenance ducts. They're planning something, Zhang said, years of experience with human athletes setting off warning bells in her head. Something big. As if on cue, an announcement echoed through the station, attention all athletes and spectators. The first ever Human-Draid space triathlon will begin in 10 minutes. Featuring orbital skydiving, asteroid parkour, and synchronized neutron surfing. Participation is voluntary but highly encouraged because, quote, "It's gonna be epic, bro." Zhang and Kthaks exchanged looks of pure horror as the station erupted in cheers. The intergalactic Olympics had evolved beyond anyone's control, becoming something that defied both physics and common sense. Should we try to stop them? Kthaks asked, already knowing the answer. Could we? Zhang countered. They watched as athletes from both species began gearing up for their improvised event, combining the most dangerous aspects of both cultures into something that would probably violate several laws of physics. You know what the scariest part is? Johnson mused, watching a human athlete help a young Draid adjust their totally rad jetpack. This is just the first Olympics. Imagine what they'll come up with for the next one. The committee members collectively shuddered. The galaxy had survived 15 millennia of Draid dominance, but 2 weeks of Human-Draid Olympic cooperation had created more chaos than anyone could have predicted. As if to emphasize this point, a group of athletes zoomed past the window, riding what appeared to be modified quantum surfboards through a field of artificial micro-black holes, while filming the whole thing for their joint YouTube channel, Extreme Beings Do Extreme Things. Well, Zhang said, reaching for what humans called aspirin and Draids called weakness suppressant, at least no one can say these Olympics weren't memorable. Speaking of memorable, Johnson checked his tablet. The closing ceremony team wants to know if they can use a supernova for the final light show. They promise it'll be controlled and totally safe, trust us. Zhang and Kthaks' simultaneous "No" echoed through 17 dimensions and briefly achieved quantum entanglement. But somewhere in the station, a Human-Draid planning committee was already working on something even more spectacular, because as both species had learned, the word impossible was just another way of saying next viral challenge. A new era of chaos, I mean cooperation. 5 years after the historic first contact between humans and Draids, Supreme Commander Zier stood at his familiar spot on the observation deck of the Eternal Dominance. However, the flagship had undergone some modifications. The traditional bone-crafted command throne now had cup holders, the tactical display showed both military movements and TikTok trends, and someone had installed what humans called a mini-fridge in the war room. Status report, he commanded, trying to maintain his dignity while wearing what his human cultural advisor had assured him was casual Friday attire, his battle armor now decorated with what they called Hawaiian print. Admiral Krex, whose scales now sported fashionable RGB lighting, brought up the latest data. The Human-Draid Cooperative Space Program has exceeded all expectations, sir. Though we're still dealing with some unique challenges. The holoscreen displayed their latest joint venture, a theme park called Extreme Universe. It combined traditional Draid military training grounds with human entertainment concepts. The result was either brilliantly innovative or criminally insane, depending on who you asked. The "It's a Small Galaxy After All" ride had to be temporarily closed, Krex reported. Apparently, touring actual war zones while singing catchy tunes was too mild for human children. They've requested we add more active volcanoes. Zier's secondary heart did its now familiar stress palpitation. Over the past 5 years, the galaxy had changed in ways that would have been unimaginable before. The Draid Empire still existed, technically, but it had evolved into something entirely new. Show me the education report, he ordered, bracing himself. The statistics were staggering. The first graduating class of the Human-Draid Cultural Exchange Academy had produced individuals who were either going to save the galaxy or accidentally create a new one. Probably both. Young Draids were combining their natural abilities with human extreme sports to create entirely new forms of entertainment. Meanwhile, human students had taken Draid military tactics and turned them into what they called epic pranks. The resulting hybrid culture was spreading across the galaxy like a particularly enthusiastic virus. The Joint Research and Development Program has also yielded interesting results, Krex continued, pulling up another report. The screen showed their latest technological achievements. A new spaceship design that incorporated both Draid battle capabilities and human entertainment systems, featuring something called a disco ball. Protective gear that could withstand both plasma storms and fashion criticism. A revolutionary propulsion system developed when someone accidentally mixed human energy drinks with Draid ceremonial fuel. Something called Space Instagram that had somehow achieved sentience. And then there's the diplomatic situation, Krex added, his scales shifting to what humans called mood lighting. Traditional galactic politics had been completely upended. Other species, who had once cowered before the Draid Empire, were now watching in fascination as their fearsome conquerors learned about human concepts like casual gaming and flash mobs. The latest intergalactic council meeting had turned into something called a rave, when human delegates introduced Draid representatives to something called EDM. The resulting party had accidentally achieved faster-than-light travel through the power of synchronized dancing. The human phrase, "hold my beer," has been officially added to the Draid military lexicon, Krex noted. It's now classified as both a battle cry and a warning signal. Zier moved to his favorite viewing window, which now had decorative LED strips around it. Below, on what had once been a military parade ground, a group of human and Draid youngsters were practicing something they called extreme origami. It involved precision paper folding while dodging plasma bolts. "Show me the latest cultural impact assessment," he requested. The data was clear, the galaxy was never going back to its old ways. Human-Draid fusion culture had created a new form of cuisine that required signing a liability waiver before eating. Sports that technically violated several laws of physics. Fashion trends that combined battle armor with casual wear. Entertainment that could be seen from other dimensions. Social media influencers who had accidentally started their own religions. "Sir," Krex interrupted his contemplation, "the human delegation is here for the annual strategy meeting." Zier straightened his Hawaiian print armor. These meetings had changed somewhat since the early days. Instead of discussing military conquests, they now focused on more pressing matters. Planning the next season of Extreme Beings Do Extreme Things. Developing safety protocols for the new Quantum Parkour League. Managing the unexpected side effects of Human-Draid energy drink collaborations. Dealing with the fact that someone had taught AI assistants about memes. Ambassador Sarah Chen entered the command deck, now wearing a modified Draid battle suit that somehow incorporated sequins. "Supreme Commander. Ready for our brainstorming session? We've got some epic ideas for the next Intergalactic Olympics." Behind her, Lieutenant Rodriguez, now the head of the Human-Draid Extreme Sports Federation, was enthusiastically showing young Draid warriors something called breakdancing, while in zero gravity. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere safer," Zier suggested. "Oh, don't worry," Sarah grinned, pulling out what appeared to be a hybrid of a human tablet and Draid battle computer. "We've already got all the safety waivers prepared. Did you know you can make antimatter explosions look like fireworks?" Before Zier could process that terrifying piece of information, the station's AI, which had recently started calling itself DJ Quantum, began playing something called space dubstep. "The galaxy was so much simpler when we just conquered everything," Zier muttered to himself. "But way less fun," Sarah added cheerfully. "Oh, by the way, your TikTok about proper acid breathing techniques went viral. You're trending in 7 dimensions." Zier looked out at the stars, remembering how just 5 years ago, the Draid Empire had been the most feared force in the galaxy. Now they were known for their viral videos, extreme sports achievements, and having the best intergalactic food truck festival in the quadrant. And somehow, impossibly, things were better this way. "Very well," he said, accepting his new reality. "Show me these Olympics plans. But please tell me they don't involve surfing on black holes again." "Of course not," Sarah assured him. "This time we're thinking quantum surfing through parallel dimensions. Totally different concept. Much safer. Probably." As Zier's third heart began its stress palpitations, He realized that the galaxy hadn't just changed, it had evolved into something beautifully chaotic. The Draid Empire had indeed lost its position as the most feared species in space, but they'd gained something far more valuable: they'd learned how to have fun. And somewhere in the station, a Human-Draid dance crew was accidentally discovering new laws of physics through the power of synchronized movement, while a joint cooking team created a sauce so spicy it achieved consciousness. The new galaxy was chaos. It was madness. It was probably going to accidentally create a new universe through the power of extreme sports. And everyone was having the time of their lives.